Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Dan Barry transports a baseball park onto a reader's lap and brings us a book with pleasure as long as the title. Bottom of the 33rd, Hope, Redemption, and Baseball's Longest Game. If you read his column, This Land, in the New York Times, you already know he's a great writer, so I'm very happy to welcome you. You wrote a great book. I loved it. I mean, I used to be a baseball fan. I'm not now. I can't keep up with it all, and I think they get paid too much money. So I don't.
Yankee fan, right?
Yeah. Is that bad?
No.
Okay. You were a Red Sox fan.
No, I was a Yankee fan, but when they
were
were very bad. From 65 to 75, they were pretty bad.
I think they were pretty bad when I was a fan. It was like 19 in the late 40s.
They had their period.
It was during the war, so they had all,
That's right.
Snuffy Sternweiss and Nick Etten and all these people. But you lived in Pawtucket. Is that how you got interested in the Pawtucket Red Sox? Or?
Well, I used to work at the Providence Journal, and for a few years, my wife and I lived in Pawtucket, and we lived close enough to this ballpark. This is a AAA ballpark built during the Depression. It was a classic, political scam, building a ballpark in a swamp. So you had to fill the swamp first with cement, and that meant a lot of money, and that meant a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
But I lived maybe 300 yards from the ballpark, and so we could hear the sighs and the screams of the fans. And so I knew a little bit about the area, certainly, yeah.
That's fun, huh?
Yeah.
So did you go to the games? You must have.
I did. I went to the games a lot. And I knew about this game. This game took place in 1981, and it was a little before my time in Pawtucket, but it was part of the DNA if you lived in Pawtucket, because Pawtucket didn't have a lot to celebrate necessarily. It was a struggling mill city. The textile industry had left that stretch of New England. So they celebrated an elephant in the zoo named Fanny, and they celebrated the fact that Pawtucket played a role in the American Industrial Revolution, and they celebrated the longest game.
It's an amazing thing, wasn't it? And it's all because the league left out a couple of paragraphs, is that?
Right, so they begin playing on Holy Saturday night. It's also Passover. It's extremely cold. There's only about 1,700 people in the stands. It's just another minor league ball game. And in the bottom of the ninth, Pawtucket ties it up 1-1, and they continue going into extra innings. It's not terribly remarkable, but it's getting colder and colder, and more fans are leaving. And then in the 15th inning, the players are thinking, well, we can get out of here now because, we have a curfew, don't we? And the umpire said, For some reason that year, the International League rules did not include that one paragraph allowing for a curfew. They don't know why. It was there in 1980, it was there in 1982, it's there today, but in 1981 that one paragraph fell out and only the umpires knew. And so then the umpires tell the ball players and the managers, we're playing. At that moment, this game kind of spins off into eternity,
Does an umpire not have the right to interpret? I mean, could he have done it, or was he like a bureaucrat who wasn't going to bend the rules?
I think that's what it was. The umpires, go by the book,
They pride themselves
like Talmudic scholars. This is what the book says, And so they held that stand from 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 25 innings, 30 innings. Now there's only about 19 people in the stands. And then finally, the managers in Pawtucket were calling the president of the International League in Columbus, Ohio. And there's a question whether he was out on a drunk or whether he just wasn't answering the phone, but he finally answers the phone. And he thinks he's not hearing correctly. What do you mean you're playing still in Pawtucket on Easter Sunday morning? And the president of the league calls in the chief umpire and basically reads in the riot act, and then the umpire comes out and goes like this. This is now in the bottom of in the middle of the 32nd inning.
At what time? 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, the birds were beginning to chirp.
And they had a game the next day.
Yeah, they had a game the next day.
During the day.
Yeah, and that game went into extra innings. And Pawtucket won on a home run, a walk-off home run on the bottom of the 10th. And as the ball player ran around the bases, the other team congratulated him because they were all exhausted. They had
tired.
Yeah.
And then they resumed this game 2 months later.
Right. So the game begins the game is played in April of 1981, and when they resume it in June of 1981, it's because Rochester, the Baltimore AAA team, is back in Pawtucket for another series, and so they figured we'll get this game out of the way. It just so happens that Major League Baseball is on strike, and so whereas there were 19 people at the end of the 32nd inning, for the top of the 33rd, there are several thousand people. It's packed to the gills.
And they made a whole big thing about it. I mean, all over the place.
International media,
Yeah.
you know, from Japan, Great Britain, and all the national baseball writers and television crews were there. It was a big deal.
And then it ended right away.
Right, in 18 minutes.
What an anticlimax that was.
Yeah.
But the book tells about that, but it also goes into the players and the town and the owner. And it's a fascinating study, and it also shows you really what the farm system is like.
It's brutal because I think you know, I've been a baseball fan all of my life, and I knew about the farm system, but I think in researching this book, I developed a much keener appreciation for how good you have to be. You know, I played high school baseball, you know, very average. Didn't go
What
my
position
career.
did you play?
I played outfield and first base. I'm a left-hander. But, you know, I went to college and think, oh, maybe I'll play baseball in college. You know,
No, you couldn't make it.
No. You know, I had a condition called lack of talent. And then, you know, so I understand how hard it is to play baseball, but to get to the single A and the double A and then to the triple A, which is the penultimate level right before the major leagues, you have to be extraordinarily good. And then just to get to the next level, you have to be very, very good, even if you're going to have like a cup of coffee and be a backup ball player. And these fellows were playing about 40 minutes from Fenway Park. A lot of these fellows were in the Boston Red Sox organization. So they're playing literally a cup of coffee away.
It's a farm team for Boston, isn't
Right,
it? Yeah.
right. And what happens is you make the minor leagues when you're 19 or 20, and you think you have your entire life ahead of you. You have all the years ahead of you, and everything will be fine. But around the age of 26, if you haven't made it to the major leagues, people begin averting their eyes, and you go from prospect to suspect. And so only in baseball, it seems, at 27, you're old. You're in your later middle years, and really it's time to go. And you've dedicated your entire life to this since you're like 9 years old. You've given up college in many cases. And so the book explores what happens to some of these fellows who did make it.
And then some of the guys who did get up there and then don't last that long and come back down. So you've got people moving up and coming down.
Right,
and
right.
meeting at this team.
Right.
So
yeah, this game was interesting because it winds up that two Hall of Fame ball players are in the game. One is Wade Boggs, who went on to play for the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees, rode the horse after the World Series. And the other is a guy you may have heard of, Cal Ripken Jr. But, you know, those are extraordinary examples, and they just happen to be in this game. But you're right, the rest of the people, you know, they're going up and down, and they go up and they'll spend a year or so if they're lucky. Then they come down, and they can't abide, you know, living in the minor leagues where you're taking buses and you're carrying your own luggage and all that kind of stuff.
All that services that you get when you're there. And the families, the effect it has on the families, the wives who are trying so hard to just have your husband make it a little bit and get that hit.
And what's interesting in among the wives and the girlfriends, they take on the personality of the clubhouse in a way, like who's the superstar? Then the wife is the superstar among the wives of the girlfriends, you know. But it's a difficult life because you always want to be supporting your spouse or your partner, and it's brutal to be told finally, you're done, you're done.
And when they're depressed, you have to make them feel good, right?
But
give them the hope. So that's the hope.
That's the hope.
Now, what was the redemption?
Well, one of the protagonists of the book is a guy who actually drives in the winning run and wins the longest game, and he's celebrated, you know, he has his 15 minutes of fame, and he's 27 or so, and he thinks he's going to finally get to the major leagues. He's been playing in Pawtucket now for 5 years, and Boston is right there. He's seeing all his teammates going up and coming back. All he wants is to get up there, and the truth of the matter is he never gets up there. And then it's, to me, what happens to him after that? How does he digest this? How does he process it? And then how do we define a hero? In his case, he develops a drinking problem, and his family breaks apart. And then he comes to terms with his alcoholism and finds redemption that way and reunites with his family, though they live across the country. To me, that's you know, how do we define heroism? Do we find heroism because a guy hit a single in the bottom of the 33rd inning, or do we find heroism because a guy tripped up and came back and understood the family unit and understood love? That's what I meant by redemption.
What happens to these players who even the major league players who do so well and then are finished at early 30s, right?
Well, now, you know, if you played a few years in Major League Baseball, you've made a few $1,000,000.
I know, yeah.
And, you know,
And hopefully you've kept some of it.
right, it's well documented that some professional athletes just blow through that money. But if you're smart, you can do all right. And, you know, you'll never have to buy a drink in your hometown bar again if you made it to the major leagues. Do you know what I mean? But these fellows who didn't make it to the major leagues, and even some who did, you know, they come back to the real world. They're living in a fantasy world. They're living in a delayed adulthood world, really, where other people are carrying their luggage and they're living large. But then when that's over, it's over. And so in this case, the protagonist, for example, for 25 years drove a truck and, you know, in and around Pawtucket. He was from Wyoming and he never left Pawtucket. And in fact, some of his deliveries were to McCoy Stadium, and he was delivering souvenir cups from the longest game, the game that he actually won. He's delivering on the back of a truck.
This is too, yeah. Is it, but he still is recognized and still appreciated, isn't he?
He is now,
Yeah.
he is, yeah. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I wish you know,
Yeah.
would I like to have made it to single A? Would I have liked to have played in college? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would have. And so, you know, I think there's also honor to be had in that you made it to the AAA and you hit a couple of 100 home runs. That's nothing to sneeze at.
So you make it to a farm team by scouts who are out there looking?
Right.
Now, do the farm teams have scouts, or is it all the major league that has the
Usually, I'm not the greatest baseball mind in the world, but major league teams will have scouts all across the country, and they'll be dogging someone who's playing for this community college or that college, or
And
doing
sometimes
well
they're
in high
former
school.
players, so
Oh, yeah.
that's the whole thing for them to do.
Yeah, and you'll see them sometimes at even high school games. They'll have the radar guns checking how fast the kid's throwing the ball.
And then it seems to me I saw some television segment or something where they recruited kids from the Dominican Republic, and they were living I guess they were in a program and they were living with families around the training program.
Yeah,
And that was just to go to the first step of the farm.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So does that happen all over the country, or is that when you're bringing kids in from
I think that's
outside?
mostly for the DR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the baseball industry or business has changed considerably even since this game.
Yeah, some things have happened, I guess. Steroid use and other scandals, other strikes.
And when did the salaries start skyrocketing, do you know?
There was collective bargaining, and that goes back 30 years. In fact, some ball players are making very good money at this time, and that's
really?
what. Yeah, by the mid 70s, you know, it wasn't, you know. Remember, Mickey Mantle made $100,000, and everyone thought that was a big deal.
Right.
I mean, that's chump change now.
But in
for-
this, if you made $2,000 a week, that was a lot, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't 52 weeks. That's why you're playing.
that was for
guess.
the minor leagues.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah. Not a bad job, though, to play baseball and get paid for it, but
No, it
it's
must
also
be fun.
difficult psychologically. It's difficult on the family, and there's a lot of travel.
So as a baseball player, I always think to myself, you know, I loved baseball, but they must be so nervous when they come out to the mound. But they're not, are they?
I think that
Some
if
of them are.
I think the
They
ones
love
who
that
really, really succeed figure out how to channel their nerves into kind of a calm, like an aggressive calm. That's what they're seeking, an aggressive calm.
And that becomes, but you need that tension
Right.
to really strive to do it.
Right.
So it's like making a speech,
That's right.
or acting or
We're
something.
being on this program.
Right.
I'm aggressively calm right now.
Oh, all right. You're not nervous
No,
about this, all right?
no.
But I know that it always is reminded they're actors in a way.
That's
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
right. In fact,
And they-
at points in the book, I describe it almost as a stage where ball players come onto the stage and effectively introduce themselves. And in the book, I say, here's Sam Bowen. He's getting up in the bottom of the 26th. And here's his backstory. And here's his future. He's played in the major leagues for maybe a couple of cups of coffee, as they say. He will never be back in the major leagues. He doesn't really know that yet. He senses it, but doesn't know it. And here he is trying to hit the ball out of the park.
And did he? I don't remember.
In his
Yes,
case,
yes,
and
he
he could
did.
hit, but he hit
And
a
it-
ball. The wind was blowing in
That's
from
right.
center field
Right.
so strongly that no one could end the ball game with a walk-off home run. But he got hold of a ball, and it looked like it was going into Attleboro, Massachusetts. It was going, and then the wind was playing with the ball. The wind is a character as much as these ball players, and takes the ball and stops it like this, and the ball just drops into the left fielder's glove. And Bowen rounds the bases back into his dugout, and he's telling the other team, he says, if that doesn't go out, we're going to be here all night.
Well, he advanced a player, right?
No, that was the third out on
Oh,
that
that
case.
was the third out.
Yeah. There's also something about the focus of these guys. In the bottom of the 32nd inning, it's the top of the 32nd inning. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning. Who would fault anyone if the outfielder threw the ball into the stands and just ended it? There's a play where a man is on second base, and everyone knows if the ball is hit through the middle, he's going to go home. And the ball is hit through the middle to Sam Bowen. And I asked him later on, I said, why didn't you throw it into the stands? Why didn't you bobble the ball so everybody could go home? He did not think that was funny. He did not understand the humor or even that draw. He was going to throw that guy out. And he threw a perfect strike because he wasn't going to let that guy score, even though it was 2-2 in the 32nd inning at 4 o'clock in the morning, and no one's watching. There are no scouts there. No scouts.
No scouts.
No.
So when you started to write this book, you had to go and find who was around?
Yeah. First, what you first do is find out whether anyone else has written about this.
Oh, I see.
And maybe that should have told me something when no one else had before,
Oh, stop.
But and then no one else had written a book about it. And then I just started calling up guys and asking them to tell me what they remembered, and so that I could say when Sam Bowen steps up to the plate, here he is. His mother shot herself in 19, when he was 14. His father died when he was 18. He's an orphan. His only life is baseball. Baseball is his family, and now he steps up to the plate.
And then what happened to him recently? What is he doing now?
He's in Nashville. He has a family, and he's selling sporting goods. And
he's doing all right.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of these guys who never quite got over the fact that his career ended poorly. He thought he had more to it, and he lives on a passing comment that Ted Williams, the great Boston Red Sox hitter, said to him something about, Sammy, you can play this game. And here he is in his mid-50s, and he at least has had Ted Williams telling him, hey, Sammy, you can play this game. And he lives off that.
So incredible.
Yeah.
So now you do this column, and how do you do that?
A lot of medication. No, what I do is I travel around the country.
You've been in all 50 states?
Yeah. I'm not allowed back in 3 of them. No, I'm kidding. Right, and so it's a mix of being off the news. So, for example, the tornadoes hit Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and I was in Phoenix doing another story, and my editor said, go to Alabama. What can I do? You'll find something. That's what they tell you. You'll find something. There's nothing more.
And the magical thing is you do find something.
Sometimes. I hope that, yeah.
Well, you do, don't you?
Yeah, but it's so nerve-wracking to just be parachuted into a place and find something, And in that case, I just happened to be on a flight with a man, and before the plane takes off from Houston to Birmingham, he asks the flight attendant, are we going to fly over Tuscaloosa? And the flight attendant comes back and says, yes. And he was sitting right next to me, and I said, you from Tuscaloosa? He said, yep. I said, did you lose anyone? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He says, nope, just my house. And he takes out a cell phone and he shows me a photograph of his house without its roof. And so I just was, fortunate enough, not fortunate for him necessarily, but for me, well, why don't we write about a tornado from one person's experience and who didn't lose anybody?
And he came out and was always grateful that he didn't lose anybody.
He can say that
was the part about that story that was so touching.
Right. He, his house is nearly destroyed. He considers himself lucky because,
his family was fine.
His family's intact. Yeah.
That's incredible. Now, are you going out to Joplin?
Yeah, that maybe. I don't know. There's a couple of. I just came back from Texas, doing some research on cattle rustling, which still goes on.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. We don't see that much here in Manhattan, but there probably is a couple of cattle rustlers. They're just not doing very well.
Well, unfortunately, I guess we see it in the sex trade or something like that, right?
That's right.
That's our version.
That's right. That's right.
Awful. But I didn't read the article, or I don't remember it, or maybe I deliberately didn't read it. You watched an execution.
Yeah.
What was that like?
I felt as though
Where was it?
my job is to bear witness, and it was in Nashville. And in this case, the fellow had done an awful thing. He had killed his own children. I think he killed 3 of his own children. To me, that speaks of mental illness.
Yeah,
it just
me
does.
too, yeah.
But his crime had been committed so long ago that he had an option between lethal injection and electrocution. And I didn't know that. I had asked to go and witness an execution. Not that I have any bloodlust. I don't really. In fact, it's quite disturbing.
Right.
But that's my job to be there. And he had chosen electrocution. And so the purpose of the column was to explain exactly what happens when the state executes someone when we execute someone. And there's a manual about this thick. And it's like a script. And it's very, very cold and calculated. And of course, then they finally put the mask over the person's face. And they say that they do that to protect his privacy in these last minutes. And of course, it's not. It's so that we don't see the grotesque effects of it. But as he's being prepared for capital punishment, it's almost biblical, because the assistant warden gets down on his knees and washes his ankles with a big sponge so that the conductivity will be that much better. And they pour water over his bald head, and then they affix the equipment. It was very difficult, but
so
I thought
barbaric,
also,
isn't it?
yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
Did he have any family there?
No,
No, he had. I guess nobody would have anything to do with him.
no.
And the other thing was, you said it was a long time ago, so he had that option. How many years between his sentence and the actual execution? What is the point of that?
Yeah, I think it was about 15 years, 12 to 15
Isn't that awful?
years. Yeah. So,
It leaves you speechless, doesn't it? That we
Right.
do this to.
right, but it's in the name of the state. It's in
Yeah,
the name of us, and
yeah.
so that's why
It's
I
really
had to be
something,
there.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite of states?
New York. I'm
Yeah?
born and raised in New York. So, yeah,
And you're still glad when you get back?
I do. I need to keep my accent intact, as I wander around.
Right.
And it's interesting, as you walk around, go around the country, to a person, people will ask, were you there for 9/11? It really resonates a decade later.
Isn't that amazing?
And then, I'll say yes. I really don't
Yeah.
go into it really. I don't go around bragging about it, But then the people will talk about where they were and how they responded. And I think here in New York, we forget how much it resonated around the country. It really, really had a profound effect.
It's amazing. Do you think it translates to people worrying about the people who were killed in the mass destruction of a tornado?
I think there's a difference, you know what I mean? Because I think with 9/11, there's an understanding it was premeditated.
Perpetrated, yeah.
Right, and that it was,
Right.
enemy against us, whereas people in Tornado Alley almost adapt to the understanding that at some point a tornado could come through. And we don't really experience that here in New York City as much.
That was amazing, the woman in your article, the Tuscaloosa thing. How many homes that she had that had been destroyed by tornadoes?
Right. This was her third.
Amazing.
So when she was a girl of, say, 8 or 9, she lost her first house. Then when she was 12, she lost another. And so, in fact, when they bought this house, she installed effectively a fallout shelter, a storm shelter, and they opted not to use it. They ran to the hospital in Tuscaloosa and found refuge there.
The scene in the Joplin Hospital is really
Yeah.
incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how did you start writing? When did you start writing?
I used to read this guy, what was his name? Breslin.
Oh,
Breslin,
yeah?
you know who he is? And, when I was a kid growing up on Long Island, and
Did you really? Is that really?
yeah. I mean,
And did you write for a high school newspaper?
I did. It was a
Yeah.
lousy high school newspaper, and I wrote lousily for it. And then in college, I was too good for the college newspaper because I was a rebel, and I wanted to be Wayne Barrett. And then after college, I dug ditches for a while and applied to every newspaper there was in the Northeast, and got one response. And in fact, I applied to Newsday and didn't get hired, but I did put in their lawn sprinklers in their Melville office, So I had a
That's pretty
master's
good.
degree in journalism, and I put in their lawn sprinklers. And then I got hired by a newspaper in Connecticut, and I was off to the races. It was a great, great, great job.
And that's the way you should start, isn't it?
That's my argument. You go to a small newspaper, and then
Yeah.
you come back with
So
a
how
full
long have you been
understanding.
writing now? How old are you?
I'm 53, if you must know.
Are you really?
Yeah. So 30 years. 30
That's
years.
pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to write another book?
Well, you said this title was too long. I'm just
love
gonna
the title.
I'm just going to write a long title for a book and not write anything else.
Never write the book, so we can't get past it. Well, when do you start to think you'll write a book, or are you already thinking about it?
I don't have anything in mind. I'm open to it,
Yeah.
but you got to take a break.
And when do you write the book?
This I didn't take really much time off. I wrote in the mornings. I wrote at night. I wrote
What
on
time do
weekends.
you wake up?
When I was writing this, it would be early 6, and
Yeah.
yeah, so not as early as Jimmy, but early. So
Breslin is finished by 9.
yeah, I know. I don't know how he does
He
that.
says, I don't either.
Yeah.
And somehow you always find what you're looking for, right? Eventually. You do. You're
This
pretty
one
good.
was like an epiphany. You know, I hadn't written anything in a couple of years, and then it just hit me. Hey, what about that longest game? So it wasn't like I had
Great.
been gathering string on it for years. I just suddenly thought, wouldn't it be neat to have a guy come up to the plate and then tell his backstory and his future? You know, make the longest game longer, which is weird, but that's
So
how that
you
came
have 2
about.
daughters, a
Yeah.
wonderful wife and 2 daughters. How old are the daughters?
Nora is 13, and Grace just turned 8
And
over the
does
weekend.
do any of them write? Do either of them write?
Yeah, they both write. They both write very
Good.
well. Yeah,
Isn't that
yeah,
interesting?
Yeah, I'm trying to kill that
Oh,
urge.
stop. It's like an actor who doesn't want their child to be an actress.
No.
Well, thanks so much,
Ah,
Dan
thanks
Barry.
for
We've
having
come
me.
in. I hope everybody reads this book because it's great, and your column. And we're looking forward to the next book.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Is there any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore? Please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.